Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about working with drawing pencils. There are basically three different types. One thing you'll notice, and I've got a couple different brands here of drawing pencils, is that at the end of the pencil that there's a letter and a number. So, for example, this one is a 4B. This is actually an HB, and here's a 2H. So what the letters stand for is the type of lead. And H stands for hard, so that has harder lead in it. And B is a soft lead, and B stands for black. So B are soft leads, and H's are hard leads. And HB is right in the middle. So oftentimes an HB is a great pencil to use if you want to get something in, but you don't want it to be too dark, you don't want it to dig in, you don't want it to get too light. It's a good in-between pencil. So I'm going to set that one aside. Now with the B pencils, they go from B2 to B8. You can also get what's called an ebony pencil. It has no number on it, but an ebony pencil is like the equivalent of a B8, so they're wonderful, they're marvelous. And in the case of the numbers, the higher the number, the more lead that it will put out. So in this case, talking about the B pencils, if you need something to be very dark, better to use a B6 or a B8 or an ebony pencil as compared to a B2. But any B pencil is going to put out more lead and make darker lines than an H pencil. So I'm going to set this one aside. We have an H2 here, and same thing, it goes 2 through 8. And in this case, the higher the number, the less lead it puts out. So an H8 would be a very fine technical type of line. A lot of times your technical pencils are very similar to these H pencils. They may look a little bit differently, but they put that kind of straight line that's not very dark in value. Let me just demonstrate that really quickly. So for example, I'm going to start with the HB, which is right in between. Okay, so it gives a nice type of value to it. Now let's look at, and I'll put the HB next to that. Now here's an H pencil. This happens to be an H2. Perhaps in this light it's a little difficult to tell, but it's a little bit lighter. I'm pressing down at the same type of pressure. And last but not least, I'm going to use the B4. And I think you can dramatically see you get a darker value with that. So, so that's a little bit about drawing pencils. Now, in regards to sharpening drawing pencils, what I recommend that you do is, first of all, the sharper the pencil, the more value you'll put out. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to sharpen this B4 pencil. And I actually prefer using the little metal sharpeners. You can tell if a sharpener is working well if it puts out these little curls of wood, okay, as it's taking that out. So that's, as the sharpener gets duller, it will do that less, okay. Some of these little sharpeners have, as you can see in this one, or maybe a little clearer in this one, have screws, and you can actually unscrew and replace the blade as the blades get older. But this is what you want. You want a pencil sharpener that's going to take off some of the wood and curls. If you do a lot of drawing, and when I say a lot of drawing, I'm talking about something like you draw 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, you might want to invest in an electric sharpener. But for most of us, working with these little hand ones are actually perfect. The reason a person who does a lot of drawings might want to invest in an electric sharpener is because just the redundancy of sharpening pencils can actually affect your hand. So another thing for sharpening, sometimes you just want to get the point sharpened. You don't want to necessarily mess with getting rid of the wood, okay? Especially if you've got expensive pencils and you're trying to save some money. And in that case, you can go ahead and you can use a little piece of sandpaper. Now, in this case, I actually have an emery board. At art supply stores, you can purchase these little strips of sandpaper, and they are useful, especially if you're using something like Conte or charcoal pencils. But again, you can easily and cheaply go out and buy a box full of emery boards and get the same effect. Okay, so those are there as well. The last thing I want to mention about pencils and in general are erasers. Erasers will remove the surface of the paper. So if you use an eraser like a pink pearl, it will definitely get rid of whatever you've got off of the drawing paper as far as pencil goes, but it also may slightly remove the surface. It may not become evident to you that some of the surface has been removed until you try to reapply value onto that spot. And generally speaking, that value will look a little bit different, possibly a little bit darker than the value that you intended. So pink pearls, I would say, there are going to be some of you who have a heavy hand, and you know who you are. Maybe you have to go to the pink pearl. Pink pearl is like 50 cents. It's not very expensive. The type of eraser that I prefer for most drawing paper is this. I believe it's a vinyl eraser. It's a white eraser. Okay. These are often awesome. They will do a great job of erasing. They don't necessarily take the surface off of your paper unless you really go to town in a spot. And last but not least, I actually really love these ones that come in a kind of a pen-like applicator, because they do a nice job. They'll give you a little bit of an edge, like a corner, and they're really good for kind of spot erasing. So these are just some options. Enjoy.